We
are
cultivate.
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 We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and with me is my sister and co-host, Maddie Stengel.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you on this fine, hazy Monday morning?
I'm here. I'm alive.
Same.
So, got that going for me.
We do.
This is the first episode of July, which means it's time to thank our lovely supporters over on Buy Me a Coffee. So thank you so much to Charlie and Elizabeth for being monthly supporters.
Yay! Thank you.
And if you would like to support the show and find out what we'll be discussing before even Maddie knows, you can sign up or give a one-time donation over at buymeacoffee.com/yieldcrime. And thank you once again for your support.
Thank you. You guys are the best. Buying us all those coffees.
I know. So much coffee.
So much coffee.
So I didn't really realize it until I finished writing this week's episode, but we've been really Civil War heavy lately. At least Civil War era
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's only been a few kind of medieval ones sprinkled in. We've really kind of been sticking to our side of the ocean recently.
Yes. That will be changing next week, which is great.
Today?
But this week, not today.
But screw you guys. We acknowledge it. We still don't care.
So this week, we are going to be discussing Major Henry Rathbone.
That's such a good name.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, Henry Rathbone. He sounds like a scallywag. Was he a scallywag? We'll find out.
You'll find out. He's a bit of a scallywag.
Ooh,
So,
scallywag.
Thank you to our research assistant, Carrie Ann, for her work.
Yay! Thanks, Carrie Ann.
Information was pulled from the following sources: a 2022 All That's Interesting article by Jessica O'Connor, a 2018 Spotlight News article by Michael Hallisey, 2013 New York Historical Society Museum and Library article, 2009 Washington Post article by Michael E. Ruane, 2008 The Last Lincolns, The Rise and Fall of a Great American Family by Charles Lackman, 1994 American Heritage article by Gene Smith, 1883 The Baltimore Sun article, 1883 The New York Times article, Civil War History Fandom, The Gettysburg Experience by Diana Losky, Find a Grave, and 2 Wikipedia links. And links to all of these articles will be included in the show notes. Got something you want to say? Shoot us an email over at yeoldecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story ideas, see any gifts you send our way, or if you just want to say hello. We're pretty friendly. Speaking of friendly, if you'd like to have real-time conversations with us, consider joining our Discord over at the Cultivate Network. You can chat with us over at the Old Crimers Cubby, or catch up with any of the other great creators that are part of the Cultivate family of podcasts. Just click the link in our show notes or over on our link tree to get started today. Henry Reed Rathbone was born on July 1st, 1837, in Albany, New York, to parents Jared Lewis Rathbone and Pauline Pinney.
That's such a cute little name, Pauline Pinney.
I know.
I just expect her to be like very small.
Very petite
and
adorable.
Pixie-like, Tinkerbell-esque.
Henry was one of 5 children. His oldest brother, Charles, was born in 1836, although he passed away the following year.
Aww.
He had a younger sibling that died in infancy in 1839. sister Anna, who was born in 1840 but passed away 2 years later, and youngest brother Jared Jr., who was born in 1844. He also has a half-sister named Pauline that was born in 1850 after his mother remarried following his father's death in 1845.
Mm. War? Sickness? Did they specify?
I think it was sickness.
Mm.
So Henry's father was a wealthy businessman, director of the State Bank of Albany and the Albany Insurance Company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He would go on to become president of Albany Medical College, and he was also the first mayor of Albany, New York.
Wow. Okay, so he came from a highfalutin family for sure.
Yes.
And he would have then been the oldest, right?
Yep.
Yeah. The head son.
The eldest and the elder son. Yep.
Yeah. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I can see where the scallywagness might come in.
Yes.
Enter hormones.
After his father passed, Henry inherited $200,000, or $8.3 million today.
Are you? Oh my gosh. At what age?
So if his father died in 45, one second,
It's going to be too much money for an age. I know it.
he was 8.
Yeah, that's too much money to give an 8-year-old, I think. It's $1 million every year, about.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't get access to it right away.
I really hope so.
I'm assuming it was like put in a trust or something until he reached maturity.
I hope so. Oh my God, could you imagine an 8-year-old with $8 million?
He just spends it all on candy.
Did we learn nothing from the monarchy? The monarchies of old.
He just buys himself a pony and all the candy.
He's like, I want Scotland, Daddy.
His mother remarried on August 1st, 1848, to Judge Ira Harris, a widower who brought 5 children of his own into the family.
Oh, wow. Von Trapp.
Yeah. Clara Hamilton, who was born in 1834, Amanda Judson, who was born in 1836, William Hamilton, born in 1838, Louise Hannah, born in 1840, and Ira Jr., born in 1843. At the time that Henry's mother remarried, he was 11 and Ira's oldest, Clara, was 14.
Okay, so that would have been kind of a rough adjustment, probably.
Yeah,
Having like teenagers acclimate. Because that's always hard, like blending a family anyway.
yeah. Well, and especially if it's just he and his younger brother, and then all of a sudden there's like 5 other kids coming into the family.
Hmm. And it's the father figure too, it's the patriarch, so you don't know what the dynamic is there too.
Yeah.
Family blending's hard enough, and now you just added quantity. And like they're rich too, and so like
Well,
that's
and
not good.
Ira was really accomplished as well. Like he was a judge, he was a senator, so he like is also a very powerful man. But, given who Henry's father was as well, it seems kind of par for the course. Like I don't think it would have been that much of a change to go from one powerful man to another as your father. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
So Clara was born in Albany, New York on September 4th, 1834, the eldest of 4 children that her father had with her mother, Louisa Tubbs, and her mother passed away in 1845.
Oh wow. So about the same year.
Yeah, so the same year that Henry lost his father.
That's interesting. It must have been like a flu or something.
Yeah, I don't know if there was like an epidemic going on at the time or if it's just a random coincidence.
Honestly, then so many things killed us and we had no idea what it was.
Yeah. Despite the fact that they were step siblings, the two became very close. And
Of
according to
course.
Mark Bodnar, former president of Town of Colony Historical Society, quote, Clara developed feelings for Henry at a young age. In time,
Mm.
Henry became attracted to Clara. Although they were not related by blood, as both stepbrother and sister, their soon-to-be courtship was frowned upon in many circles. End quote.
Yeah. I mean, it's never a good look, but it happens so often.
Yeah.
I think it's way more prevalent than we want to say out loud.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, having a certain type is pretty genetically heavy in your family. The odds of you
Hmm.
being attracted to the same type of stranger your parents are attracted to is high. Still weird though.
Henry was educated at Churchill's Military School in Ossining, then later graduated from Union College and Albany Law School. He was a member of the Sigma Phi Society, spoke French, but he wasn't the best academic student. So he was like smart,
What?
but he wasn't
So he did enough to be successful, but not enough to be
like top of his
like,
class.
yeah, like a visionary, a leader kind of a thing.
Yeah. Like he was smart, but he wasn't like, I am the smartest one alive.
Capable, not motivated.
Yes. In 1858, he joined the New York branch of the National Guard, and after getting engaged to Clara, he joined the Union Army in 1861 to fight as part of the 12th U.S. Infantry in the American Civil War, serving as captain of
Nice.
Company C during the battles of Antietam and Fredericksburg.
Oh,
He
wow.
also fought Confederate forces at Yorktown, Wilderness, Spotsylvania, North Anna River, Totopotomoy, and Petersburg. I am sorry if I said any of those wrong. I am not that smart.
You are too.
Henry's stepfather, Ira, was in charge of the 6th New York Cavalry, and he also fought at Gettysburg. Henry didn't have the best constitution, and his doctor, G.W. Pope, noted in the summer of 1862, quote, his bodily health, never robust, suffered impairment from fever, end quote. He was ill for 2 months, and the following winter, he suffered a malaria-like illness.
Yeah. I wonder, I feel like pneumonia is similar to malaria in symptoms. Am I just talking out of my butt right now?
I have no idea. In 1863, Henry was pulled from the front lines and given a desk job on orders from his doctor. In the summer of 1864, he was brevetted for gallantry during the Petersburg campaign, earning him the rank of major. And thanks to his stepfather's
Wow.
influence, he was appointed as the assistant adjutant general of volunteers in 1865.
Is it adjutant or adjunct?
Adjutant.
Weird.
Yeah. I know. I double
That's
checked that when I
crazy.
was looking at it because I was like,
Yeah.
does it seem right?
Sorry, you can cut this part out. No, but symptoms of pneumonia and malaria are similar enough that
Mm,
malaria can sometimes be misdiagnosed.
gotcha. Look at you.
So,
So smart.
yeah. If I'd only been good at chemistry, I could have been a doctor.
There you go. Chemistry is hard, man.
It's so hard.
Although I do love me a beaker.
I love a good mortar and pestle.
This is true. Henry and Clara, who had become good friends with the Lincolns, were invited to join them at Ford's Theater to see the comedy Our American Cousin on Good Friday, April 14th, 1865.
Oh man.
At this time, Clara was 30 and a cultured, self assured woman who moved in the highest Washington social circles. She had become an
Ooh.
intimate friend of Mary Todd Lincoln and was a familiar guest at the White House.
Wow.
Henry was 27, an intense looking young man with receding, wavy auburn hair and mutton chops. Because, of course, he had mutton chops.
I love that he was intense and had receding but thick, luxurious hair.
Yes.
You know he was hairy because mutton chops are not easy to grow.
No.
You gotta have genes.
Yeah. You gotta want the chops.
The mutton. That's actually the whole reason why he was promoted as much as he was. It was just the thickness and luxuriousness of his mutton chops that made him rise to major.
There you go. Major mutton chops over here.
Hmm. Major mutton chops. It's actually how we won the war. Was this mutton chops?
By the power of our mutton chops. Fun fact, Henry and Clara weren't the first people to be asked to accompany the Lincolns that night. They had asked the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, who we've mentioned in the past, and Thomas T. Eckert, the chief of the Military Telegraph Office in the War Department, as well as Speaker of the House, Schuyler Colfax, who had to leave for a trip to the West Coast, and reporter Noah Brooks, who had a heavy cold, and even their oldest son, Robert, who begged off to get some much-needed rest after returning from working with General Grant.
They were 6th on the list.
The Grants were also supposed to attend, but Mrs. Grant, she really didn't like Mary Todd, so they declined.
Yeah.
It was during this play, in the third act, that John Wilkes Booth famously entered the presidential box, shooting Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head with a derringer. Lincoln had been positioned nearest to the door in a rocking chair, with Mary Todd on his right, then Clara, while Henry was farthest from the door, sitting on a sofa. Recalling it later, Henry stated, quote, "I heard the discharge of a pistol behind me, and looking round, saw through the smoke a man between the door and the president," end quote. He thought he heard Booth shout something along the lines of "freedom" before Henry leapt from his seat and grabbed Booth before he could flee. Henry was shocked and horrified by the look of pure wrath on Booth's face as he wrestled with him, causing Booth to drop his pistol before he drew a Bowie hunting knife. Booth slashed
Ooh.
at his head and attempted to stab Henry in the chest, but Henry blocked it by raising his arms, receiving a slash, quote, "into the inside of his left arm near his armpit. It pierced his biceps and grazed the bone a fraction of an inch from 2 major blood vessels," end quote, as it went from shoulder to elbow.
God, the amount of force it would take to get that deep too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God. And this is probably all happening within like a minute.
Yeah. Henry refused to let Booth get away, grabbing onto his coat as he prepared to jump out of the presidential box, which caused Booth to lose his balance as he jumped onto the stage, breaking his ankle. Henry yelled out, quote, "Stop that man," end quote. A member of the audience, a man named Joseph B. Stewart, climbed onto the stage and rushed after Booth, continuing to yell, "Stop that man," as he pursued him, while Clara was heard screaming, quote, "The president is shot," end quote.
That's super helpful, Clara.
Henry immediately turned to check on the president, finding him unconscious and mortally wounded. He rushed to open the door to the box, but found it, quote, "barred by a heavy piece of plank, one end of which was secured in the wall and the other resting against the door. It had been so securely fastened that it required considerable force to remove it," end quote.
So John Wilkes Booth and his other party members probably took a lot of time to set that up beforehand.
Yep. Once the door was forced open, several surgeons entered to begin examining the president, and as soon as the wound was discovered, it was decided to remove him from the theater.
Mm-hmm.
While the president was being carried out to receive treatment at Peterson House across the street, Henry asked Major Potter to help him escort Mary Lincoln across the street so she could be by her husband's side. And it wasn't long after this that Henry passed out from blood loss. Clara arrived at Peterson House shortly after her fiancé, placing his head in her lap and stuffing her handkerchief into the wound as he lay in a semi-conscious state, until he could be examined by surgeon Charles Leal, who had been previously attending to the president. Upon examination, it was discovered that the wound he had sustained from Booth was worse than he thought. The knife had cut his arm almost to the bone and severed one of his arteries.
Oh, shit.
While Henry was taken home to be treated, Clara stayed with Mary for a while as she watched over her husband, who passed away 9 hours later on the morning of April 15th, 1865.
That's really awful that his body survived so long after that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if he experienced any sort of pain at all. I
Yeah.
hope not.
Clara wrote a letter to her friend Mary, which is now housed at the New York Historical Society, in which she described the harrowing ordeal. In it, she shared, quote, "My dress was saturated with blood. My hands and face were covered. You may imagine what is seen, and so all through that dreadful night when we stood by that dying bed, poor Mrs. Lincoln was and is almost crazy," end quote.
Yeah, I remember she had a lot of just had a really awful life.
Yeah. She kept screaming that the blood on Clara's dress was her husband's, but it was in fact Henry's, because Clara hadn't been
Mhm.
anywhere near the president when he had been shot.
Lincoln. Yeah. I doubt Mary could really understand.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty traumatic ordeal.
Yeah.
At the Harris house, G.W. Pope was called to check on Henry. When he arrived, Henry was pale as a corpse and stripped naked. He was delirious,
Mm.
likely as a result of blood loss. He raved that the president had been shot, yelling, quote, "God in heaven, save him," end quote.
Oh, sweet
When
man.
Clara arrived, she was the perfect nurse, bringing water, towels, and bandages to the army surgeon that had accompanied Dr. Pope. And after he was all sort of like fixed up, the couple left Washington to return to Albany so Henry could heal at her family's summer home.
That really doesn't seem like a good idea.
I think
Why would you move him so far? Like just away from the danger?
I think it was just to get away from the excitement that was going on in Washington, just so they could be somewhere quieter and calmer while he
Yeah.
healed.
But I mean, he almost died.
Well, I don't think it was something where, like, literally the second after he was wrapped up, they were like, "Okay, let's put him in a carriage and let's head to Albany." But I think it was a matter of, like, things are really crazy here. Let's go somewhere a bit
Yeah.
quieter. Let's go be around family and just kind of
Mm.
be in a calmer environment while he heals.
That makes sense. Because this is also right when the war is winding down too.
Mhm.
Like it's still pretty fresh.
So I'm assuming that was why they did that. Clara had kept her white satin dress from the fateful night at Ford's Theater, which she kept in her
Oh,
bedroom closet in the Harris family summer home in Loudonville, New York. She never washed or destroyed it.
so where is it now?
Well, according to the book The Last Lincolns, quote, "On the first anniversary of Lincoln's assassination, Clara said she was awakened in the night by the sound of laughter. She told her family it was the ghost of Abraham Lincoln, chortling as he had on the night of his assassination when he was enjoying the comedy Our American Cousin moments before Booth fired the fatal shot." End quote.
Oh, ew. So she heard his pre-death event again
Yeah.
attached to the dress. What a twist. Ugh.
So then after this, the door to the closet was removed and the space was bricked up.
Yeah. Is it still there? Bricked up?
We'll get to it.
Hmm.
You have to wait and see.
No.
A couple years after the Lincoln tragedy, on July 11th, 1867, Henry married Clara Harris when he was 30 and Clara was 33. They would
Hmm.
have 3 children together: Henry Jr., born in 1870, Gerald Lawrence, born in 1871, and Clara Pauline Jr., born in 1872. At the time that Henry's eldest was born, Henry had resigned from the military in December of 1870, having achieved the rank of brevet colonel.
Wow.
Now, although Henry was able to heal physically, he never emotionally recovered from the events at Ford's Theater.
I don't know how you could, especially then.
He agonized over his perceived inability to prevent the president's death or apprehend Booth, and began to suffer from hallucinations. After resigning
Yeah.
from military service, he struggled to hold a job.
Yeah. A lot of them do.
In 1869 and 1870, respectively, Henry was treated for, quote, "attacks of neuralgia of the head and face, and in the region of the heart, attended by palpitations and at times difficulty breathing," end quote.
Mm.
Only the
Just like him.
Rathbones' closest friends knew about Henry's mental health struggles. His close friend, James Barrett, who was also a Union veteran, noted, quote, "I don't think that he ever recovered from the shock of fright in President Lincoln's box at the theater. The scene always haunted his mind," end quote.
You have to think, too, that really says something about the event itself because the man experienced war like right before that,
Yeah,
where he was in a few of like the gnarliest battles of the Civil War, and
yeah.
he didn't recover from that.
Clara, to her credit, was as supportive as she could be of her husband. She noted in a letter to a friend, quote, "I understand his distress. In every hotel we're in, as soon as people get wind of our presence, we feel ourselves become objects of morbid scrutiny. Whenever we were in the dining
Mhm.
room, we began to feel like zoo animals. Henry imagines that the whispering is more pointed and malicious than it can possibly be," end quote.
Oh, that's so sad.
It didn't help that when coverage came out regarding Lincoln's assassination, both General Grant and Lincoln's bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamon, were both quoted as saying that had they been there, the president would have been saved.
Yeah, so that would have just compounded Henry's guilt.
Mhm.
Assholes.
When President James A. Garfield was assassinated in 1881, Henry was once again reminded of his failures, falling into a deep depression.
Mm.
The December 29th, 1883 edition of the Baltimore Sun noted, quote, "Colonel Rathbone was suffering from extreme mental depression caused by dyspepsia in its most aggravated form," end quote.
That's so sad.
Over time, Henry became convinced that Clara was being unfaithful, and he began to resent the attention that she paid to their children. And he also resented any attention that she received from members of
Anybody.
the male sex whenever they were out and about.
Great. Yeah, she couldn't have prevented any of that.
No. He additionally threatened her on several occasions after he suspected that she was planning to divorce him and take the children with her.
Yeah, that would have been really scandalous still at the time.
Hmm.
It's projecting a little bit, though.
Yeah. Henry made multiple failed attempts to get a position as a consul for the United States, taking his family on several trips to Europe during which he would be seen by European doctors and visit, like health spas.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until Chester A. Arthur's presidency he was finally offered an appointment as consul to Hanover, Germany.
Yeah, just go somewhere else.
Yeah. Henry
Hmm.
was cultured and well liked, so President Arthur, who was a family friend of the Rathbones, hoped that sending Henry overseas, like the change of scenery would help him heal from his nightmares and his sense of guilt. Like out of sight, out of mind type
Yeah,
of thing.
while also feeling some semblance of importance.
Yes. In 1882, the family, along with Clara's sister Louise, sailed from New York on the steamship Wera for Germany. At this time, Harry was 13, so Harry Jr. was 13, Gerald was 12,
Hmm.
and Clara Pauline, who went by Pauline at this time, was 10.
Okay.
The new job, relocation to the province of Hanover, and their apartment on Heinrichstrasse didn't improve Henry's mental health.
Hmm.
7 months later, everything came to a head on the morning of Christmas Eve, December 23rd, 1883.
Oh no.
The following was noted in the December 29th, 1883 edition of the New York Times.
Oh no.
Quote, "The Rathbone Tragedy, London, December
Oh.
28th. Colonel Rathbone has shown signs of melancholia for the past 2 months. On the night of the tragedy, he went to the room where his 3 children and their nurse were sleeping and asked to see his children. His wife appeared immediately afterward and, ordering the maid to lock the door, led her husband back to their bedroom. Directly afterward, shots were heard, followed by cries for help. Mrs. Rathbone's sister and a servant rushed to the bedroom door, and finding it locked, broke it in. They found Mrs. Rathbone dying on the bed, weltering in her blood. Colonel Rathbone lay on the floor, bleeding from 5 different wounds. A 6-shooter with 3 empty chambers and a dagger covered with gore were found nearby. Doctors were summoned immediately, but Mrs. Rathbone died without being able to give an account of the deed. Colonel Rathbone was able to reach the bed and immediately became insensible. When he afterward became conscious, he appeared not to connect himself with the crime. He seemed to believe that a stranger had committed it. The neighbors say that Colonel Rathbone lived on most affectionate terms with his family. The Berlin correspondent of the Daily News says that Mrs. Rathbone was buried on Friday, the funeral being attended by many American and English friends of the family. The same correspondent says that Colonel Rathbone may recover, end quote.
Did he?
During the attack, Henry shot Clara once in the head and twice in the chest, with one bullet passing through her body before it, quote, came out at the backbones, end quote.
Oh.
He then stabbed her repeatedly, one entering her heart, before stabbing himself 5 times in the chest as he attempted suicide.
Half-assed.
When police arrived, Henry claimed that people were hiding behind the pictures in the wall. Clara's sister Louise was the first person on the scene and the one who alerted the police. Louise then sent a telegram home to let her mother and brother know about the tragedy. Clara was laid to rest on December 28th at the Stadtfriedhof Ingesund Cemetery. William Harris, Clara's younger brother, immediately booked a ship to Hanover to retrieve his sister, nephews, and niece. The 5 of them returned to the United States on February 4th, 1884, and the children would go on to be raised together by William.
Man. Clara, she saved those kids.
Yeah, she did. Following Clara's murder, Henry was taken to the hospital to receive treatment for his self-inflicted stab wounds. Newspapers were skeptical that Henry would survive from his injuries, but he did.
Then what?
Consul William C. Fox visited Henry, reporting back to Washington, quote, he is hopelessly insane. He is suffering from the worst form of melancholia and imagines that everyone is conspiring against him. He realizes fully what he has done and says that it is the result of a conspiracy, end quote.
No.
German authorities fully recognized that Henry was mentally ill when he was brought to trial and formally charged for his wife's murder. After recovering from his injuries in April of 1884, he was convicted and committed to the Provincial Insane Asylum for the Criminally Insane in Hildesheim, Germany.
Man.
On August 7, 1891, Henry was seen by a Prussian physician named A. Rosenbach. Dr. Rosenbach noted that at the time, Henry was 53 years old, 5 foot 11 inches tall, and weighed about 140 pounds. The asylum records noted that Henry suffered from hallucinations, quote, declaring that the other inmates were conspiring against him, that the walls were hollow and contained spray apparatus that blew out dust and gas, end quote, and that it was the cause of his headaches. He also reported hearing people gliding suspiciously in the corridor outside his suite. Henry was being examined as part of his application for a military pension.
Yeah.
Dr. Rosenbach noted that his condition was incurable and, quote, the cause of his disease is not known, end quote.
I think we all kind of know.
Yeah. Henry spent the rest of his life in the asylum, which was 27 years.
Oh my God. Wow.
And on August 31st, 1910, he was reported as being, quote-unquote, near death, but he didn't actually pass away until 2:15 a.m. on August 14th, 1911, at the age of 74.
Damn.
He was buried next to his wife in Hanover, Germany, on November 20th at the Stadtfriedhof Ingesund Cemetery. Fun fact, after several decades without visitors, the Rathbone burial plot was resold to a family named Renson in 1952.
Oh my.
The hole was dug deeper, and the new residents were placed on top of the Rathbone remains.
That's fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you'd have to do that at some point, but like, damn.
Well, and there were a lot of sources that said that their remains were dug up and discarded, but I'm going based off of what was on the Find a Grave listing, and it was like a member of the family that said, no,
Yeah.
They're still there. There's other people buried on top of them now.
That's so crazy. That's so crazy.
In 1910, Henry Jr., who at that time was 40, had his mother's infamous dress burned since it was viewed as nothing but a curse on his family.
Whoa.
Yeah, he had the brick wall torn down and took the dress outside and burned it.
So many historians are just crying right now.
Well, I think there's a picture of her wearing it, like after the fact,
Yep.
with the blood on it.
Wow.
Speaking of Henry Riggs Jr., he became a congressman for New York for many years and was instrumental in the government's purchase of the large amount of Lincoln memorabilia that had been part of a private collection belonging to Union veteran Osborne Oldroyd.
Just didn't want to include the dress.
No. He's like, yeah, not that.
Mm-mm.
Items in this collection can be viewed at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Henry married Laura Lucille Harney in 1903 at the age of 33 when she was 37.
Kind of close to his dad's age
Yeah.
when he got married.
The couple didn't have children, and he passed away at the age of 58 in 1928. I couldn't find any information on Gerald other than that he got married in 1908 to Gertrude Greenwood Joslin. He was 37
Oh,
and she was 26 at the time of their marriage, and the pair didn't have any children. Gerald passed away in 1936 at the age of 65.
okay.
Clara Pauline went on to get married to Dr. Buckner Maggle Randolph in 1902 when she was 30 and he was 31. The couple had one child together.
Still late too.
Yeah. The couple had one child, daughter Louise Harris, in 1904, and Clara passed away at the age of 45 in 1918.
So she was the only one to extend the line.
Yep. And that's the sad story of Major Henry Rathbone.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Now that you tell me the story, I'm vaguely familiar of it. Like I've heard of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's kind of noted as like a footnote in the story of the Lincoln tragedy.
Yeah, that's so sad.
If you want a playlist of all our episodes on YouTube, click the link in our show notes or in our link tree and subscribe today for not only a list of our full catalog, but a separate list as well, just of our Can You Crack the Cramp Word segments.
All they want is love, everyone else wants their fortune. Based on history, we discover the Great Depression through a set of actual heirs and heiresses as they fight off fortune hunters, greedy relatives, envious rivals, and scandals. Would you be able to spot and resist a fake in your midst? How far would you go to gain a fortune? These interweaving stories reconnect the past and reveal new connections. Subjects include the Titanic, King Tut's tomb, American dollar princesses, debutante balls, royal paramours, Ponzi schemes, sweetheart scams, love triangles, bank failures, suicide, and so much more. The historical series As the Money Burns by Nikki Woodard is available at all podcast directories and the website asthemoneyburns.com.
And this week's podcast plug is the As the Money Burns podcast. All they wanted was love.
Ooh.
Everyone else wanted their fortune. Based on historical research, As the Money Burns is a deep exploration into the lives of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes and what happens when the Great Depression hits.
Ooh.
Nikki was on a recent episode of Can You Crack the Cramp Word as well, so be sure to give it a listen, and we have a link to her show in the show notes. And we have a listener question from Carrie Ann, and she wants to know, are there any spooky mysteries from your area that you find interesting?
Spooky mysteries. You know, I haven't really looked at any spooky mysteries in my new area.
And you live next to a graveyard.
I do. I do live next to a graveyard now. I should look into that and see what kind of weird, spooky things are in this area. I don't actually know. I mean, we always knew of like haunted homes and stuff growing up in Iowa of like different places, and like at the University of Minnesota, there was a lot of weird spaces, like the tunnels and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you guys don't know this, winters in general are really, really harsh or can be very harsh in Minnesota. So the University of Minnesota has an entire underground system to get to essentially every building on campus underground. And it can get really creepy depending on which labyrinth you get into.
Yeah.
That's kind of the first thing that really comes to mind as a recent one. About you?
I don't really know of anybody, anything in my current area. If you look up haunted my location, it just comes up with like the Dead End Hayride.
That's funny.
Which makes sense. I mean, because that's a famous Halloween thing in my area. So, but yeah, I haven't really looked into it. And I can't think of any places in my immediate area that have any stories. But I also haven't really looked into it either. Maybe we should. Maybe we should consider that for
Yeah.
this year's Halloween.
Apparently that we're really close to a paranormal road.
Mm.
Yeah. And then there's even like a super creepy cemetery next to it.
Ooh. TBD. Anyway, what's something good you'd like to share?
Something good. My one good thing this week is our car has been in the shop for a couple weeks now, and we'll get it back this week, and I will be mobile again. It's hard being a one car household, so it'll be nice having 2 cars again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my one good thing. I'll make that mine. What about you?
Is it bad that I don't really have anything?
No, I don't think so. What's one okay thing? Like meh.
I found a fun Funko Pop of Eddie Munson from Stranger Things at Target. That's like a
Oh,
Target
cute.
exclusive, and I bought it. And I'm going to add him to my Funko Pop collection, which
Nice.
I need to clean my office. And I think that's one of the things I'm going to get done this week is clean my office and then actually set out all my figurines and stuff that have been in storage for a while. And now I'm going to set them out and get them all out. And then I can take a picture of all my Funko Pops and share them.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. It'll be nice having them showcased.
Mm-hmm.
I know I got my Cubone out after when we moved. I have one of the bigger Funko Cubones, and I have him right at the staircase at the entrance to our house, and I really like seeing him there every day.
All right. Shall we?
We shall.
A great way to support the show, if you can't do so financially, is to leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Good Pods, Castbox, Podcast Addict, and or Audible. We have a new 5-star review on Apple Podcasts
Wow.
from Bitsy Boorud.
Well, thanks.
They say, fun show. I love listening to these two. They have such great back and forth and clearly love what they're doing. Every episode is full of interesting history as well as lots of laughter.
Thanks.
Thank you. Looking for more content? You can find us online at yieldcrimepodcast.com. If you'd like to see pictures from this week's episode, not to mention bonus content and funny memes, make sure to follow us on Twitter at YieldCrimePod and on Facebook and Instagram at YieldCrimePodcast. On TikTok? Of course you are. Follow us at YieldCrimePodcast. I don't know what the sales are for July yet, but I'm sure I will in time for the next episode. So, on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Madison.
And we'll see you next time with another tale
As old as crime.